we were talking earlier with the Chassanim about what exactly is the notion of bashert and of soulmate. What exactly does this mean, and what does it do for us? So for a Chosson, it's very different than for a younger man, because the fact that every marriage is bashert doesn't really help you make a choice. The choice of who to marry is made without knowing who is bashert. I mean, that's why there's a choice. If you knew who was bashert, there would be no choice. So how do you choose who you're going to marry when you can't really know whether somebody is bashert or not? So what you need to discover, what you need to find out is, having met this person, do you hope that she is the one that is bashert? And if you hope that she's the one, then you go ahead and you make plans to be married. If, in fact, the marriage takes place, then you know that it was bashert. So before you get married, all you really need to know is that you would like it to be bashert. You're hoping it's bashert. So then if in the last minute it doesn't work out and you don't get married, you know that it was not bashert. But when you find yourself married to this person, then all doubt disappears, and now you know that this was bashert. So for the Chosson, it doesn't really help. Getting married is not where the bashert idea is very useful. But once you're married, the knowledge that there can be no mistakes, and there never was a mistake, and no marriage was ever wrong, and that God doesn't play dice with the universe, as Einstein said, that there can be no mistaken marriage. So every marriage is exactly the way the Eibishter planned it and the way the Eibishter wants it, which is why the Mizbeach cries when there's a divorce. What does that do for you once you're married? It makes every effort that you need to put into the relationship, it makes every effort worthwhile. Mully, you there?
Right here.
Okay. The telephone is acting funny. So,
no, you're good.
Knowing without a doubt, removing all sveikus, knowing that this is yours to take care of, this is your destiny, this is your shlichus, this is your place. Your home is your home, your wife is your wife, and your children are your children, and there's no room for sveikus. That's the foundation of life. Because the foundation has to be solid without any possible trace of doubt. If you bring in doubt into the very foundation of your life, then you're shaking the whole structure. And people who live without this emunah, people who are married without this absolute bitachon, are really on shaky ground. And the marriages are not as reliable. So the people in the marriage are not as secure. And when there's no security, there's anxiety. Where there's anxiety, there's friction, there's tension. It's not a good picture. So, knowing that we are married to the right person, knowing that this is what our neshama came here to do, this gives us a lot of encouragement and a lot of motivation to do the right thing and make it perfect. Now, we're supposed to talk about children in this particular session. And this is a very serious and very kind of scary thought. We've always known that a fetus is fully conscious and knows and feels and hears and sees everything that is going on. From that story where Ashley Yoladete and his mother would sit by the window of the Beis Medrash when she was pregnant, so that the fetus learned in yeshiva before he was even born. We've always known this. Science is maybe starting to catch up, maybe, because anything ruchniistic science can't handle. So the physical fact is that a fetus is a complete neshama, It's the neshama that sees, not the eyes. It's the neshama that hears, not the ears. So when the neshama is not yet born, not yet a finished fetus, where the ears are not developed and the eyes are not developed, the fetus sees and hears better than when the eyes and the ears do develop, and he is born, and now he has to see through these very limited kalim of eyes and ears. The same is true with thinking and feeling. So what we know is like this. When you create a baby, you're basically producing, at the first stage, you're producing a human being without a body. The baby is basically a nefesh, a neshama, with a tiny little connection to anything physical. Then over the 9 months, that little bit of physical connection develops into a complete body. But it's still a tiny body. It's not really an independent body. It doesn't breathe on its own. It doesn't eat on its own. So it is still 90% neshama and only 10% body. So the question very basically is, how do parents, how does a man and a woman, how do they create a person? What we're told in science or in nature, that only describes how the body starts to exist. We know how the body works, but when you're making a baby, you're not making a body, you're making a person. And that person will grow into a body, or will be absorbed or connected to a body. But in the first stages of birth or of conception, you're really creating a person, a personality, a complete neshama with all the 10 keiches, with the levushim and so on. How do you do that? This nobody talks about. This is a complete mystery, and yet this is the main essential definition of birth. You're reproducing a human being, not a little body. There's some very interesting things. The Gemara says that when David HaMelech said in Tehillim, I'ovi v'imi yazavuni v'Hashem yasfeni, it sounds like he's being very disrespectful of his parents, criticizing them, blaming them for something. So what exactly is David HaMelech talking about? So the Gemara says, David HaMelech, being a tzaddik, had no shikha. Tzaddikim don't forget. So people who are not tzaddikim don't remember being conceived, they don't remember being in heaven, they don't remember being 9 months in the womb. It's all forgotten at the moment of birth. But by tzaddikim there is no shikha. So tzaddikim remember all the stages and all their levels of existence. David HaMelech says, Avi v'imi azavuni, at the moment of conception. Conception takes place a couple of hours after the intimacy between husband and wife. What are husband and wife doing then? Generally, they're sleeping. The father is asleep, the mother is asleep, and the most dramatic event is happening to this little neshamala, being conceived. And it looks around, it's frightened, and it looks around to see who's in charge and who's taking care and who's directing this process. And he sees his father and his mother is sleeping, and he's scared. So noticing, realizing that the Eibishter is there, the Avi v'imi azavuni v'Hashem ya'asfeni, the Eibishter takes me in, that gives the fetus the strength and the courage to survive the trauma of the birth. or of the conception. Later on, further development, David HaMelech says that Gam ki elech begeitz al moves, that even when I go in a valley of a dangerous valley, what is he talking about? What is this dangerous valley? So again, the Gemara says that's the birth canal. Fetus leaves the womb and is not yet in the air, outside on its own. There's a valley because there's a life inside the womb and there's a life outside on its own. In between, there's a valley, and that's a dangerous moment. So it's a valley that has a little bit of a threat of loss of life, and that's again a very scary, traumatic thing. So David HaMelech says, I remember when I went through that, and even when I was going through that valley, I was not afraid because you were there. In other words, every fetus is fully conscious of what's going on, what the parents are doing, what's happening to it, and what's happening in the world around it, and seeing that the Eibishter is there, the Eibishter's attention and the Eibishter's care, that's what enables a fetus to survive the trauma of conception and the trauma of birth. But for most people, after surviving it, the trauma makes them forget. So we know that a fetus is a very sensitive, feeling, aware creature. That's why there are so many instructions and so many laws on how to be intimate, because intimacy is what produces babies. So in addition to considering each other, what is dignified, what is respectful, what is uplifting, what is edel, not to lose respect for each other, not to degrade each other, not to let the marriage or the intimacy degenerate into boring, meaningless, nadish activity. In addition to all of that, there's also the consideration of the baby. What's best for the baby? So the Gemara says that there are 9 circumstances under which one should not be intimate. You shouldn't be intimate when you're angry with each other. You shouldn't be intimate when you're drunk. You shouldn't be intimate when you're asleep or half asleep. You shouldn't be intimate when you're planning to get divorced. You shouldn't be intimate if you're thinking about somebody else. And the main reason for that, although there probably is more than one, the main reason for that is the consideration of the baby. How is the baby affected if the parents are not thinking about each other? Distracted. If there's something going on in the house and they're thinking about something else, they're distracted. What effect will that have on the baby? We can only guess, but probably that the baby will have a hard time concentrating and will also be distracted. Here, but he wants to be there. He's doing this, but he's thinking about that. He doesn't get focused on what's happening. If there's anger, wouldn't be surprising if the baby is born resentful and angry. If you're half asleep, the baby can be a little slow, so on and so forth. So, in consideration of the children, you want to make sure that what is producing the child is the pleasure of intimacy and not some other pleasure. Selfish pleasure, not a grubby, meaningless pleasure, not the excitement. One of the things, one of those 9 situations is that you shouldn't be intimate where there's no lock on the door and it's not your house. In other words, there's the danger that somebody might walk in. Actually, that can add excitement to the activities. danger, a little adrenaline there, is not the pleasure or the excitement of intimacy. So it's like you're making bread and you figure, let's throw in some vinegar. I love vinegar. Good with salad. But in bread, it ruins everything. So adding another ingredient, which may add some interest or flavor, but it's not the right ingredient, it ruins the bread. So in the intimacy between husband and wife, there has to be all the positive things, the willingness to be mashpia, the willingness to be makabel, but also there shouldn't be any other unnecessary ingredients, because that too can ruin the intimacy. So if the excitement is coming from something other than the intimacy, that really is destructive. So for example, if the lights are on and you're excited because you're seeing each other, seeing is not intimate. See intimacy. That's one of the reasons that halachically the lights have to be off. Because if you see, even if it adds excitement, it's the wrong excitement. It's a selfish excitement. Man sees a woman undressed, the feeling or the pleasure, the excitement, is not shared. It's only his. So that makes them separate rather than one. It's something that comes between them. And in general, the eye only sees things. So what the eye sees can never help or support intimacy. That's why the Eibishter doesn't let us see him. Est upon him. You hide, because if we saw him, we would lose interest after a week. You've seen that, been there, and that's it. You lose interest. So although it could be very exciting at first, it's not the excitement that lasts, that brings people together. It's not the excitement of intimacy. And the Eibishter wants an intimate relationship, and that begins with getting to know. This is the beginning of intimacy. So the Eibishter says, I want you to hear me. I want you to know me. If I let you see me, you'll be happy with that, and that'll be the end of the relationship. So, intimacy in consideration of a baby just makes it all the more meaningful and all the more holy. And we're actually really told that under the chuppah, what kavanah are you supposed to have? What should you be thinking under the chuppah? You should be thinking what kind of children you want. Children. You be mispalel for good children. And in a psychological or mental level, it's not the tefillah, it's not a bakosha that you're asking the Eibishter to give you good kids, but you're actually picturing, imagining in your mind what kind of children you want your children to be. And that is the beginning of their existence. It's the beginning of their creation. You start creating them under the chuppah. Famous story that somebody asked a Rebbe or somebody, my kid is 3 years old, when should I start chinuch? When should I start? He says, you're 3 years too late. A baby begins with the chuppah, or maybe even earlier. But certainly it's a significant step that if you visualize, you're giving it reality. So just thinking what kind of children you want, imagining a house full of kids and what kind of kids they are, that begins under the chuppah. And that has an effect on the children. We also found out, medically, it's not public knowledge, there's a huge difference, physically, begashmias, in the zera, sperm itself. There's a difference in depending on the motivation and the thought that produced it. If the taiva was a kosher one, which means it's for a person, definite person, you're excited about somebody and you want to be with that somebody, it produces a healthy zeta. If the zeta is produced by a taiva that is not connected to a person, just an imaginary, it's a self-entertaining taiva, or if it's zeta levatoa, that zeta is really a different quality. It's a different makeup. It has a different effect on the person, a different effect on the child. So the child born will be different. That's why thinking about another person while you're making a baby with your wife, not only the child is affected in some spiritual way, but actually it's a different zeta. So the seriousness of making good babies is becoming more and more clear, more and more obvious. Like everybody knows that if you're an alcoholic, your children are going to be problem children. If you're a drug addict, you shouldn't have children because they will absorb or carry your drug addiction or the drugs that's in your system. So we all know that if you overdo drugs and alcohol, that's going to affect your child. What the Torah says is that even if you never drink, you're certainly not an alcoholic, but one night you happen to have a few drinks, and that night you conceived this baby, and you were a little bit intoxicated, which means you were not completely focused, that's going to have a negative effect on the baby. Even if that's the only time in your life that you ever drank. And the same if it's the only time you ever got angry at your wife. Or it's the only time you had a thought of getting divorced. Or if you're actually planning to get divorced, then as soon as you made that plan, as soon as you come to that decision, halachically you have to move out of the house immediately. That there's no chance that you might be intimate and produce a child who's going to be a ben grushas halev, because that kid will be a very unhappy child. Now we see what's going on in the world. Children who are, first of all, there's the epidemic of ADD. Children who can't focus possibly because they were born without focus. There was a television in the room and the television was on, and the attention was distracted. But there should never be anything in the bedroom that could be a distraction. Besides the ADD business, there's also a certain coldness, certain distance between children and parents on the children's part, where they don't feel connected, they don't feel attached. They don't feel a family bond. Completely cold to their parents, indifferent. It's a very scary thing when you see it. Of course, you don't see it immediately, but even at a very young age, they're just not interested. They don't feel any special feeling towards their mother or father, any different than they feel towards a stranger. And a really scary thought, again, is not yet being talked about in medical circles, but there are theories that are floating around that there has been a terrible rash of childhood suicides. And they say that this started right after abortion became legal. What they're saying is like this. When abortion became legal, it became very common for parents who discover that they're pregnant to sit down and consider what to do. Options. So even the thought itself, thought, well, maybe I'm not going to have this baby. The baby hears that thought, feels the thought. If you have a conversation about it with your husband, the baby hears that conversation. And so the baby is born with a with an ambivalent feeling towards its own existence. It can live or it cannot live. It's an option. So if it gets a little frustrated as a teenager or a preteen, if they get a little frustrated or a little bored, they have options. And if you tell them that what they're doing is dangerous and that it might kill them, they're not impressed. It doesn't mean anything to them. So I won't live. So I don't know if that's literally scientifically true, but just the thought alone has to sober us up that what we're thinking and what we're saying in the presence of the fetus, about the fetus, is actually heard, it has an effect, and it influences the child's behavior when he grows up. The good news is, almost every one of us was born, conceived in imperfect conditions. Children born after the Holocaust, who knows what parents were feeling, thinking, distractions, the tensions. None of us were conceived perfectly. How do we make up for that? So I heard the Rebbe say, and I haven't found it in a Sikha, in the printed Sikhas, the Rebbe say by a Fabrengian that if a child is born without mikveh, mother will go to the mikveh even after the child is already an adult. It will have a retroactive effect on the child and give him the benefit of being born with a mikveh. So that's the technical, if there was actually no mikveh. But for that feelings and thoughts that are unhealthy, the cure, fetus, because the problem is at a cellular level. The actual makeup of the zera, different or imperfect or whatever. How do you fix that? How do you fix the building blocks of life? The actual cells go to the building blocks of Torah, holy building blocks. The building blocks of Torah are the Oisius, Torah Shebiksav. And in Torah Shebiksav there are three kinds: Chumash, Tilim, and Tanya. So by reading the letters, looking at the letters, absorbing them, your eyes and through your ears when you hear the sounds, that's how you repair the cellular level of life. So there is nothing that can't be cured, but when we're making a baby, the Eibishter wants us to do it right and create perfect babies. So all of the laws of tznius, of husband and wife, when, where, how, it's all designed to give us perfect, optimally healthy babies that can survive anything. Indestructible, emotionally, spiritually. So my favorite story I heard from Rabbi Yoel way back when we were teenagers, and I really don't know why he told us the story, but talking about the Kotzker Rebbe, Chassidim, the Kotzker Chassidim were kind of under the impression that the Rebbe wasn't paying attention. Long time the Kotzker was locked in his room. He was impatient with people. He couldn't put up with their shtick, with their lack of emes. So they thought that he wasn't noticing or he wasn't aware of who his Chassidim are and so on. So one time when they were sitting by the Tish, asked about a certain Chassid who usually came that Shabbos and he wasn't there. So they said, no, he didn't come because he's too distressed over his business, something happened. Kotzker said, no. Not how he would react if he had a problem. This is not his character, it's not his personality type. And Chassidim were amazed that the Rebbe had such insight into this Chassid's personality. So they took a chance and they asked the Rebbe about another Chassid. How would this Chassid react? And he described him intimately. Great detail with great insight. So they went from one to another. Then they asked him, what about your son? Kotzker said, do I know my son? Know with what thoughts I invited him into this world. A very powerful bond between a father and a son doesn't begin when you take him out to a baseball game, or when you take him to a fabringen or to shul. It begins way back. You decide, I'm going to become a father. How do I invite my child into this world? And the child feels invited. The child knows that he's invited. I'm not saying anything, like holy thoughts. I don't know what the Kotzker's kavanas are. But for us human beings, inviting the child means you're conscious that what you're doing is producing a child, or could produce a child. So it's not a selfish little indulgence. It's not a silly teenage kind of sexuality. It's awesome. The child feels welcome, wanted, invited, bonded. The child that will do anything for their parents, the way a child should be. Children are meant to be. So the Eibishter is giving us all this wonderful insight and information that we would never know by ourselves, and medicine is light years behind trying to catch up. And we know this, and we've known this for thousands of years, and that's why we've had such good families and such healthy people. Connection to life, that even after a Holocaust, the first thing people thought of was to start a family and to have children, because life goes on. Most other people would just simply sit in despair and not be able to pick up the pieces of such an experience. The generation has been conceived and created properly to have that kind of resilience and that kind of strength. Maybe not the emunah. I'm just talking about the healthy relationship between husband and wife. So that the children born from that were not giving up on life, and they were not in yiyush. It's an amazing thing. Our children are so fragile, they freak out over a paper cut. We need to give our children all the benefits, born in the healthiest, strongest, most natural way. So every thought, and I think this is the bottom line, every thought that there's something in halacha, there's something in Shulchan Aruch, there's something in the chumras that is really unnecessary. It's just frum shtick, and I'm not so frum, I'm not so spiritual, I'm not so holy, so it's not for me. There is nothing holy and nothing frum about these laws. It's Teiras emes, that's frum. The Torah tells us that this is the way it works, then that's how it works on every level, on the cellular level, on the emotional level, on the mental level. Oh, emes. We should take it seriously, and we should feel very fortunate that we were given these instructions, that we were given this insight, that we do know what we're doing, and we're not just playing lives with the future of our children and our families. We really can feel like a mensch. We're armed, we know what we're doing, and we can do it right.
Rabbi, there are times when husband and wife are together when it's not shaykh to, as you put it, create a baby or make a baby because, let's say, the wife is pregnant or other circumstances. These 9 stipulations from the Gemara and the whole kavanah that you're referring to, how does that apply in that setting?
Well, there's another reality, another mystical reality. We were told, yeshiva, teenagers, that if you see a girl, shul or wherever, and you think of her sexually, that is a subtle form of rape. Such a disrespect for the person to use a human being, and could be a very nice and dignified and important human being, and you're using this person for your sexual pleasure. That's literally rape, helping yourself to another person for your own enjoyment. Only in this case, it's a mental rape, but it shows that you're giving yourself license, you're taking liberties with another person without any respect, without any consideration of that other person. Something even more mystical than that. It seems that this mashpia mekabel energy, Eid and Keli, exists on every level, even on levels that we can't see and that we don't notice. Every time there's an energy, sexual tension or excitement between a man and a woman, though they're not married, though they don't do anything, energy itself has an effect on a neshama. Somewhere in Olam HaNeshamas, a neshama is affected by that exchange of energies. And the neshama is moved either in a good place or in a negative place, where it belongs or where it doesn't belong. Because we know that when husband and wife are together, like for example, Avraham and Sarah, every time that they were intimate, they created a neshama. That neshama never came down into a physical body. They were childless. But every time they were together, they moved a neshama from wherever neshamas hang out to a different level of heaven, to another place closer to earth, not all the way down to earth. Those neshamas, we're told, are the neshamas of the Gedim. That's why they relate to Avraham and Sarah and are called Ben Avraham or Bas Sarah. So every time a husband and wife are together, they are affecting a third neshama. That gives that famous quote from the Rebbe to explain why he was giving dollars. That the Frierdiker Rebbe taught every time two Jews get together, it should benefit a third Jew. On a Ruchniisdike level, every time a husband and wife, a man and a woman, get together, and there's an exchange of the male and female energies, a third neshama is affected. If it's affected positively, then it's an improvement in Maisa Bereshis. If it's affected negatively, then there's eventually going to have to be some tikkun. That neshama needs to be back or elevated or whatever. I don't know. So every time a husband and wife are together, they're doing something to a neshama somewhere. And if the woman is pregnant, then every time they're together, they're doing something for their child's neshama. That's why, by the way, doctors are in the habit of telling people that in the 8th or 9th month of pregnancy, they shouldn't be intimate. There's a danger of infection. Fetus says that the exact opposite. Till the baby is actually born, the intimacy between husband and wife has a beneficial and healthy effect on the baby, and it helps the baby be born alert and energetic and so on. So there's never a case where you're just doing your own thing. It's nobody's business. You're not affecting anybody else. It's just purely for your own entertainment. Powerful thing that we do, and we have to do it in recognition of the reality. Give it the respect it deserves, because it's an awesome thing. To reduce it to just fun and games, we're doing ourselves a disservice. Here's the definition or the meaning of edel or not edel, elevated or degraded, healthy or not healthy. Very simple definition, a very general definition. Body is created in a certain way that enables people to be intimate and to have babies. So the body has what is necessary for that purpose. We do intimacy correctly. We involve only those parts of the body that are necessary for the intimacy. Uncluttered, it's uncomplicated, there's no necessary parts, no unnecessary activity, no distracting activity. So, edel intimacy, just as rule number one, edel intimacy does not involve the use of the hands or the eyes or any other part of the body other than those parts that are meant for intimacy and for making a baby. Very accepted in modern life that sexuality involves every part of the body and every kind of activity, which again the Shulchan Aruch says is permissible, but certainly not optimal. So the proper intention or the proper behavior is involve anything that doesn't belong to intimacy. Torah says that looking at intimate parts of the body or kissing intimate parts of the body shows that you have lost your dignity, you've lost your lost your shame. That's not what intimacy means. It's not what intimacy is designed for. A foreign ingredient that doesn't belong. So the first step in making sure that our intimacy is edel is that we don't fapachke it with all sorts of other semi-sexual or semi-intimate activities. That's fine for when you're 6 years old and you're playing doctor and you're discovering what a body is and what a body feels like and what a body looks like. But, once you're grown up, that's really not appropriate adult behavior. So we should keep it from what intimacy is supposed to be. And that's why bad habits, the lights on, running around naked, playing games, it's all nice fun if you're a child. An adult, it's really inappropriate because it could end up being the intimacy and then becomes a habit, and then getting it right again becomes a real challenge. The tznius and the edelkeit that we practice before marriage is really very helpful. In a non-Jewish world or a non-frum world, have sex for 10, 15 years, from the time they're teenagers to the time they get married, and then all of a sudden they're married, and now they have to be intimate, no more sex. It's a very hard adjustment. But we believe in tshuva. Believe that you can switch, you can change, and we have the koyach to do tshuva, and we have Torah behind us, and the emes behind us, so that once we start to behave properly, the truth itself carries the day, and it becomes the real thing, even if we've been messing around before. And this is a story that I mentioned to the Bachrim. There's a story that they tell that the Frierdiker Rebbe, of course, was a heavy smoker. He came to America, and one day the doctor who was there to treat his paralysis mentioned that smoking, that they're starting to think that smoking is not healthy. And there was an ashtray on the Rebbe's desk full of cigarette butts, because the Rebbe was a heavy smoker. A little later in the conversation, the doctor takes out a pack of cigarettes and offers the Rebbe a cigarette. The Rebbe said, "I don't smoke." The doctor was a little puzzled by that. The Rebbe said, "You told me that it's not healthy to smoke, so I don't smoke." The powerful message there, the powerful imagery is, a heavy smoker who decides not to smoke thinks of himself as a smoker trying to break the habit, determined to break the habit. Rebbe said, not, well, I used to be, I am a smoker, but I'm going to change, I'm going to stop, Once I hear that smoking is not kosher, then I don't smoke. Not the person who used to smoke. Different person. I have re-identified myself. I used to think of myself as a smoker. Now I am a non-smoker. It's completely undone, completely changed. That's called in Lashon Kodesh, it's called hataka. When you move from one place to another, there's havoda. You're mavir from one place to another. Or there's hataka. Hataka is more like uprooted and replanted. Whereas havoda means movement, gradual steps that go from one place to another. Rebbe said, I'm not mavir, I am maitik. I used to be smoker, now I am non-smoker. Done. I'm a different person. And that really is the essence of tshuva. Tshuva means, in 1 second and in one thought, I become a different person. Move myself from one identity into a completely different identity. And so the smoking is gone. It doesn't torture me. It doesn't haunt me. It's not traumatic for me. I'm a non-smoker, and as a non-smoker, I'm perfectly okay without a cigarette. So no matter how we behave until today, from today on, we can be maitik. We can transplant ourselves most instantaneously.
Rabbi, let me jump in with a couple of questions here, and thanks to those who are submitting them. Here's number one. What if unhealthy, egotistical unions are the ones I enjoy most? What if there is no physical enjoyment most of the time in the kinds of intimacy that Rabbi Manis is talking about? What if this kind of intimacy will make me frustrated and unfulfilled? Am I supposed to live with guilt?
I don't know why guilt would come into the picture. If you're allowed to do whatever you do, then there's no guilt. There's the question of what improvement or what upgrade you can introduce to this area of your life. And we should always be looking for upgrade. So whatever it is, it's kosher. What would be the next step up? How can you upgrade it? Because this is a relationship that's going to go on for many years. It doesn't go up, it'll probably go down. and it won't be what you like, and it won't be exciting. It'll start becoming boring and tedious. So we've got to keep moving up. So it's true, the excitement of just having fun and letting loose, yeah, that's definitely a pleasure. It's a different pleasure that comes from feeling like you're on top of the situation, you're in control, you're doing the right thing, you're dignified, your wife respects you. It's a different pleasure, of course. And it can be even more pleasurable once you get into that plane of existence. So there's no demand, there's no immediate change that has to take place, but you always have to be open to improvement. You always have to be open to being moved by some noble. It should always be appealing. It should always be desirable. And we should move ourselves closer and closer to that. That's just being a mensch. It's growing up. So as long as the taiva and the Yetzer Hara is strong, it says do whatever works. Forget that there are better worlds and there are better experiences and healthier ways of being, and don't give up on it. Sell yourself short.
Here's another question that came in. How does not involving any other parts into intimacy relate to the advice that Rav Chisda gave his daughters, Gemara Shabbos 140b? And the second part of that question is, specifically using hands in foreplay in the intimate areas is not optimal, ? Isn't there a Gemara that Rav Yechanan told his daughters about the benefit of using hands gradually in specific intimate areas?
Well, I think the story, the punchline of that story is that if you don't let your husband use his hands, his desire will never fade. It's actually saying the same thing. If I'm remembering correctly, the advice was, don't let your husband's hands go below your waist. It's what you don't do that makes the relationship work. And again,
What does that mean?
That in the true intimacy there are no hands, and that keeps the desire strong. You exchange it for some hand games, it detracts from intimacy, and that's why people are so much more excited about oral sex and using hands and using visual. They even want to take pictures and anything but intimacy, because that keeps you non-attached. It's objective. It's impersonal. And that, of course, is the exact opposite of what intimacy is. You got to be careful that shouldn't replace intimacy, because that's so much easier. So people are being sexual or intimate, and they don't want to look at each other. They don't want to get to know each other. They don't want to get emotionally entangled with each other. That's so vulgar. It's so disrespectful of each other.
And what about the element of this type of foreplay causes the wife pleasure? How does that fit into, quote unquote, not letting the hands below the waist?
Listen, both husband and wife can experience pleasure that is not intimacy. You just have to be careful not to make that a habit and not to allow it to replace intimacy. Certainly, that's not how you make a baby.
Who should be setting the tone for that type of holy?
It depends who you're talking to. If you're talking to the husband, you say, yeah, it's all your responsibility. You're the man of the family. If you're talking to the woman, you say, Isha, it's same bylaw. You can elevate him and save him. So it just depends who you're talking to.
So just
hopefully.
based on the questions that are coming in, I'm going to ask for clarification here. The fact that foreplay and touching in intimate places causes physical pleasure is not a steer to the fact that the pleasure of intimacy that we've been building up to in the past 3 hours of this conversation is one of a whole different ballgame. And if we don't aim for that, we're selling ourselves short by going for the physical, on-the-spot pleasure of foreplay and what comes with it.
Is that a statement or a question?
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And that ties back in with what you said, I think, about 2.5 hours ago, that lost my train of thought. Back to you.
What happened 2.5 hours ago? I wasn't even talking to you 2.5 hours ago.
Talking about in this course.
Oh.
No,
with the Bachrim.
That you said this, the whole approach here is we're looking that our understanding is a secular one, and if our need is a self-serving need, then it's unfortunate that you have a lady in your life that you're using to fulfill this need. And the fact that there's an approach of I need to be fulfilled in a quote-unquote sexual way in this relationship is not an avera, but it's missing the point.
And there's no question that after a year or two, that all that stuff loses its excitement. It's meaningless. Once you've gotten over the newness of it, it's totally boring.
So for example, if a kala is taught, a wife is taught that she needs to purchase revealing garments for her husband's interest and pleasure, and the husband is comes to make his effort to be intimate, and she's presenting herself in a way that's appealing and attracting, and he's trying to be holy. How do you approach that?
First thing is you laugh about it, because it is kind of funny. In a non-Jewish world, in a world of immorality and meaningless sexual relationships, every woman is competing with other women. Even a wife is competing with other women. She has to be more attractive, more appealing, more exciting, because her husband has options. He's looking at other women, he sees other women, and she has to win the contest, which is tragic and horrible. Our world, that's totally unnecessary. Really, akala. Starting off a relationship, it's all fresh, it's all exciting, it's all new. You have to dress a certain way to get your husband's attention? Come on, that's funny. That's ridiculous. It's completely, the assumption that that's based on is completely wrong. If a kala in a Lubavitcher family feels a need to dress a certain way to get her husband's affection or attention, we're really in bad shape.
And if it's the kala teacher or the mother-in-law that is teaching this,
yeah, so we have to laugh at it and say, what are they thinking? Since when does a beautiful young kala need help? She needs plastic surgery also? Tons of makeup? Come on. Need it. And that would be a perfect opportunity for a husband to say, you're perfect without that. It's nice that you're doing this for me, but it's really unnecessary.
All right, so Rabbi, to put you up against the wall.
Yeah.
Practically speaking, you're talking to human beings, I think, for the most part. From what you're saying, and this concept of wherever you're holding, strive to go higher. That's beautiful, and that's what we train for our entire life. But what is it realistically you want from the participants that are on the call here there's a bar that was set that I don't know. I can't speak for anybody, but it may be within reach, it may be beyond reach. So to walk out of this conversation feeling positively impacted with a strong positive focus, what should the approach be? What's the takeaway?
I was introduced to a group of young men in California, all of them playboys, extremely wealthy, all single, all 30-something. There's like a club, get together, they do things together. And they wanted me to come and talk to them about marriage. And I don't know if they were really serious. It was just a curiosity for them. Anyway, so I look around and I see how they're behaving, how they're talking. So I said to them, I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna make an assumption, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. At this stage in your life, 32 or 33 or whatever, right now, the thought of getting involved with a woman makes you sick to your stomach. Never admit it to your friends. They all said it's true. When the Shulchan Aruch says everything is permitted between a husband and wife, that's a fact, but it's also a warning. If everything is permitted, how long will it take before you are absolutely turned off? Thought of getting involved, of having to deal with your wife, of having to be, it becomes like a boring religious responsibility, and like what's happening in our society. Everything is kosher, everything is allowed, you can do whatever you want, with whoever you want, whenever you want, and yet the whole country is on Viagra. Wrong here? Oh, it makes perfect sense. We were talking the other day. Sex is not a need. It's entertaining, we're interested. It stops being entertaining, we don't need it. Turn off. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to see you. I don't want to have to deal with you. Leave me alone. I'm bored. And then we start going for all sorts of other things. We have to find alternatives, which is really a scary thought. So what I'm saying is, healthy human beings don't allow their marriages to deteriorate. Boring activity, because we've done that already. Do anymore. It's not exciting anymore. That's when the familiarity becomes contempt. So don't believe for a moment that if you can do whatever you want, if you can be free and carefree and careless and just have a bunch of fun, that's going to last more than 2 years. It gets old very quickly. On the other hand, if you know that there is more, you're going to grow. You're going to find deeper and better intimacy with time. Your marriage doesn't go downhill. You actually increase meaningfulness of it and the satisfaction of it. I saw online a guy was blogging. I have to find the name of it, but it really is like a powerful statement. He's not a Jew, and he writes like this. He says, "Ever since I can remember, I have been gay. Even when my friends were discovering the magazines with naked ladies, I wasn't interested. I wanted to see naked men. But I am happily married to a woman. I am completely fulfilled and satisfied in my life and my relationship and so on, because marriage, I forget exactly the words he uses. He says, the intimacy that I find with my wife isn't missing anything. But when I think about sex, and I gravitate towards men. which means in our language, he's basically saying something like this. My Yetzer Hara is homosexual. Life is wonderful because I have a wife, we are devoted to each other, we're making a life together, we have children together, and we have intimacy. That's not my Yetzer Hara's preference, but it's a better life. That's an amazing, people are condemning him as being a hypocrite, and he's going to be frustrated, and he's not being true to himself, whatever stuff. But even the possibility that could be true makes it so clear that there's reality and there's Yetzer Hara. So your Yetzer Hara can be for playing games, playing doctor, running around naked, doing all sorts of childish exploration versus the real thing. So even if you're going to be childish, don't forget that there's a real thing as well. Make your marriage dependent on what your Yetzer Hara likes or doesn't like. Risky investment. Your marriage is more than a Yetzer Hara. It's bigger than the Yetzer Hara, and it has to outlast the Yetzer Hara because the Yetzer Hara gets bored very quickly. Well, we're going into Sivan, into Matan Torah. At Matan Torah, the Eibishter introduced himself by saying, Anochi Hashem Elikecha, I, who am God, am yours. Anochi Hashem, I am God of everything, and yet I am yours. Elikecha. I am yours. I'm giving myself to you. And our response should be that we're mekabel you with all our heart and soul. Kabbalah Satera b'simcha b'pnimius. And the same is true also with marriage. There are people who take Matan Torah like other people treat sex. Oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to become a tzaddik. I'll go to Gan Eden. I'll have this tainug, that tainug, this pleasure. I'll have kavod. I'll have everything but the intimacy. Sidim hear the Eibishter and they respond accordingly. I'm not interested in the tainug of Gan Eden and the tainug of being a gadol or being a Talmud Chacham or being a tzaddik or being the Eibishter's favorite. Eibishter says, I am yours, then of course I have to say, I am his. Called an intimate relationship. There's no question as to which one is better, which one lasts, which one is emes. So we should be mekabel the Torah, we should be mekabel the Eibishter b'simcha or b'pnimius, and we should enrich our inner life. Not be so distracted by the sizzle or the glitter of the Nadisha world out there. They don't like it, they're giving up on it, they're suffering from it. Why should we go there?
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for your time, wisdom, and all the goodness that you bring here and you bring all over the place. Good Shabbos, everybody, and we'll continue the program with the question and answer session in Mitzvah Hashem this coming Sunday night at 8 p.m. New York time. Good Shabbos and Atzlacha Rabbah.
Please,